For over a century, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment has captured the attention of literary critics and psychologists alike. Much of that fascination centers squarely on the psychological framework of its protagonist, Raskolnikov. At the core of his worldview is a strict hypothesis. All of humanity is permanently divided into two distinct categories. Mapping this theory visually, on one side we have a dense block representing the ordinary masses. According to Raskolnikov, these are the law-abiding citizens whose inherent nature and duty is to exist under control. On the opposite side is a much smaller, isolated cluster, the extraordinary few. These are the individuals who operate entirely above the law, dictating the course of human history. Because they shape the future, this elite group asserts a moral right to bypass societal rules. If achieving their goals requires stepping over a corpse or wading through blood, they are permitted to do so. Raskolnikov states this explicitly in the text. The second category all transgress the law. They are destroyers, for the sake of the better. This binary framework drives his decision to commit murder. But when we test this theory as a legitimate sociological map, a fatal structural flaw emerges. Raskolnikov's framework relies on an extreme form of utilitarian optimism. He assumes that those who break the highest laws are acting as torchbearers for societal progress. In practice, high-level transgression is rarely motivated by the betterment of society. Looking closely at the extraordinary node, we see the error in his logic. What Raskolnikov defines as a necessary crime for progress is often just an emblem of concentrated power in disguise. When this group applies violence, the flow of that action doesn't travel outward toward societal betterment. It loops right back inward, concentrating power solely within the node itself. To accurately understand systemic violence, we have to discard this flat binary. We need to rebuild his ethical framework into a modern, multi-layered sociological taxonomy. Sociological divisions rarely exist as a single global binary. They nest within each other like fractals. If we shift our focus away from the global elite and zoom directly into the daily reality of the ordinary population, we find that the exact same oppressor-oppressed dynamic replicates itself internally. A new top tier forms within this subdivision. This micro-elite is driven by modern variables like wealth disparity, caste hierarchy, and social desirability. Below them is the new ordinary subdivision, those lacking these preferred traits, permanently subjugated by their immediate peers. This geometry takes on a concrete form in the current Indian political climate. The ordinary group further fractures into internal elites defined by caste or religious superiority, while those lacking these traits are pushed into the lowest tier of the micro-hierarchy. Power becomes entirely relative. A person can possess zero influence on a national scale while operating as an untouchable dictator within their own household or workplace. This fractal flowchart changes how we view the actual murder in the novel. The victim, the pawnbroker Alyona Ivanovna, is typically viewed as a helpless old woman. Here, she occupies the top node as a wielder of systemic power. Her financial extortion of the poor represents top-down cruelty. Because it aligns with capital extraction, the broader system accepts it as a baseline norm. Conversely, Raskolnikov occupies the bottom node.
He is the marginalized subject, trapped at the base of her specific micro-hierarchy. When the weight of that oppression results in violent resistance, the flow moves upward. The system instantly flags this upward disruption as a criminal act and responds with absolute force. This same structural lens applies to modern domestic dynamics. If we look at gender as a power subdivision, top-down abuse is often covert, invisible to the system until it is too late to intervene. When violence flows from men occupying the extraordinary subdivision toward women in the ordinary subdivision, it is frequently met with systemic apathy or desensitization. But when a woman violently defends herself, breaking that established equilibrium, the reaction is severe societal outrage. The act of self-preservation is stripped of empathy and aggressively prosecuted. The institution does not punish cruelty. It punishes violence that flows upward to disrupt the established hierarchy. This raises a crucial psychological question, and Raskolnikov correctly identified his own oppression within this micro-hierarchy. Why does his act of resistance destroy him mentally? The mechanism at work here is the human conscience. To understand Raskolnikov's failure, we have to apply a scanning layer to the model that represents the protagonist's own internal moral friction. As literary critic Edward Wasiolik points out, Raskolnikov's self-image required an oppressor, and he was completely incapable of committing a crime indifferently. His live conscience prevents him from holding a position of power. The novel provides a stark contrast through the character of Svidrigailov, Raskolnikov's dark double and the true embodiment of the extraordinary class. The strict requirement to maintain top-tier power is not a yearning for greatness. It is the possession of a completely dead conscience. In a modern context, this is the institutional abuser. The figure who hides behind a facade of piety or social standing, sitting peacefully in the shade while burying atrocities beneath the soil. A man burdened by guilt is ultimately self-defeating. A man with a dead conscience is infinitely more terrifying and highly successful within the system. We can test this structural geometry with one final thought experiment: a societal revolution against a dictatorship. In this model, the oppressed ordinary masses unite. Their leader successfully targets and eliminates the extraordinary dictator at the top. In the aftermath, the rebel leader stands before the newly freed group, justifying their claim to the vacant throne based entirely on their role in the liberation. Here is the tragedy of the structure. The moment the rebel ascends to the top node, their status switches. They instantly inherit the extraordinary position. Zooming out, the hierarchy's geometry remains entirely intact. The system hasn't changed, only the occupant shifted. A revolution that replaces the ruler without dismantling the structural hierarchy itself merely transforms the oppressed into the new oppressor. Raskolnikov's original theory of the noble transgressor was a romanticized fantasy, a psychological defense mechanism designed to soothe the guilt of participating in an inherently violent system. Dostoevsky ignores the utopian roadmap to focus on the cynical, cyclical mechanics of power transfer. Power is never destroyed by a simple transgression. It is only ever inherited by those willing to sacrifice their humanity to hold it.